This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Matt Gupta.
Chapter 48. The Dictator's Halls. Ignatius had retreated to the citadel by the time Camervan had returned from his parley. Dervan had assembled all of the members of the citadel guard by this point, even those who had been dispatched to protect the nobility of the city. There were about 800 of them, all divided up into companies of 20. It was quite a sight. Their armor glinted in the sunlight, and their spears stood tall. Camervan navigated his way past the battalions and entered the citadel. The hall was suspiciously empty considering the events. He made the long walk down the hall, his heeled boots clacking loudly with each step. When he made it to the throne, he discovered Ignatius staring up at the ceiling. "My lord," he greeted. "Will they surrender?" Ignatius demanded instantly, not looking down. "No, my lord," Camervan shook his head. "They are intent on waging war against us. They have a declaration of war against us." He held up the scroll. Ignatius growled and had one of his servants bring the scroll up to him. He unraveled it and read, muttering under his breath in disgust. "How dare they? They blame me for the shithole that this kingdom has become. They consider my authority void and meaningless." He let out a growl. "A public declaration of war to be read throughout my city. Who is he to declare war? I rule this kingdom. I carved out this piece of the world. I kept it together for decades. My blood flows through its streets. Who is he to pretend to be the king of my kingdom?" "There is more," Camervan interrupted, ignoring Ignatius's rant. "Lord Stormworth rides with them." "Stormworth? That traitor. Is there no one in the world I can trust? I truly am alone." "I'm here, my lord," Camervan reassured. "My family remains loyal to you." "Do they?" Ignatius growled again. "Your family has already betrayed me. Your brother stands in the harbour and has likely already turned to Alistair. How do I know that treason does not run in your family?" "What are you talking about?" Ignatius began panting to himself. "Everybody will turn on me. All men are such wretched things." "My lord?" Camervan stepped back uncertainly, his hand drifting slightly to his dagger. He wasn't trained in any way to use it, but it gave him comfort to know it was there. Ignatius did not see the dagger, but he did not need to. "Guards," he shouted, "arrest this traitor. Bring me his family and kill any who resist you." As if they were waiting for such an order, 2 guards burst from the doorways and grabbed Camervan. They were mercenaries, not the usual citadel guardsmen. Suddenly, the dagger was in Camervan's hand, and he slashed the arm of one of the guards. His armor deflected the blow. It took the guard seeing Camervan recoil back from the blow to realize that he had been struck. "Arrest him," Ignatius shouted. "Kill him, I care not. Get him out of my sight." "No," Camervan shouted. "My lord, please." The guard he had stuck punched him in the gut and then in the face, sending several broken teeth from his mouth. "Get him out of here," Dervan commanded, who had been making his way across the long chamber. "My lord," he called up to Ignatius, "the citadel guard is ready. What are your orders?" Ignatius wasn't listening. He was muttering to himself. "There are vaults hidden amongst the deepest catacombs of the city. I must move the gold to be kept safe. Alistair must not get his hands on it. No. Yes." He suddenly noticed Dervan. "You," he pointed a ringed finger. "Assemble your men. Move my gold to a safe place, away from prying eyes, and defend it with your lives." "Where shall I take it, my lord?" Dervin asked, successfully hiding his relief that his men would not be fighting. "Away with you," Ignatius shouted, "before I have you arrested also." Dervin took a deep breath, fighting the urge to meet this threat. He bowed and departed, somehow crossing the gap between the throne and the door in an instant. "Our lord has lost himself in despair," he relayed to his lieutenant. "How predictable," his lieutenant said dryly. "Did he happen to give us our orders before he lost his mind?" "We're to move his gold into the vaults," Dervin nodded thankfully. "Take only your most trusted men. The only thing more dangerous than an army is a madman." "And the others?" The lieutenant jerked his head backwards at the companies of men awaiting their orders. "They won't thank you if they order themselves like this only to go back home." "Good point," Dervin nodded. "Let us take to the wall, evacuate the outer streets." "There is the question of who is in command of the city," the lieutenant grimaced. "Now that our dictator has arrested the only men who could have taken over our defense from him." "Shit," Dervin hadn't thought about this. "We must free the nobles that Ignatius locked up. Let them take command." "You know we cannot do that," the lieutenant shook his head. "We have no authority to pass judgment or pardons. The only person who can, I suppose, is the high priest. We must bring him here. Right now, he is the most powerful man in the city." The lieutenant shook his head. "He is in prayer with the Fountain Legion. How convenient that when the city comes under attack, he secluded himself in the most defensible building in the city. He will be no help to us." "It is his right and duty," Dervin breathed out in annoyance. "Go to the temple and drag him to his post if you have to. I doubt the Legion will protest, given their bullshit about protecting the kingdom." The lieutenant seemed to like this idea. "Yes, sir," he saluted and left, taking about 50 men with him to carry out the various orders. "Citadel Guard," Dervin called. The men sprung to attention. They may not be soldiers, but they were disciplined. "This battle is not ours, and our actions here far exceed our duty. But this is our city, our home. I ask you to help me keep it safe. They want the kingdom for themselves, and they will fight for it with their lives. We fight to protect the innocents within the city, the women, the children, the old and the infirm. We will lay down our lives for them because that is what we must do. Will you help me?" It was no rousing speech, and there was no cry of inspiration, but the Citadel Guard simply saluted and stood tall. "Move out to the wall and await further orders." Another lieutenant appeared next to him with a clack of plate metal. "It seems we are now the officers and generals of the city. Give the ranks out to those who deserve it, but be quick about it." The companies of Citadel Guards turned and began the march through the city. The captains of the Citadel Guard were on horseback, warning civilians to get into their homes and stay out of the way. They reached the wall before long, not having to be burdened by litters and regalement that Ignatius had. The companies all formed by the wall. Dervin went atop it and sent the rest of his force into the city to evacuate the civilian stragglers. Dervin raised an eyebrow and exhaled as if he was blowing bubbles into water. The army was in full view now. The rear lines had begun setting up the war camps. Ignatius had been correct. It wasn't the 13 legendary legions, but 3 more legions had arrived. The army now outnumbered the city by a full 5,000 men. Dervin couldn't help but feel anxiety. For all of his respect for Felthor, even his skill at leadership wouldn't be enough to stop their wrath. There would be so much death here, and he suspected that he would not live to see the city captured, for captured it would be. He could see the trebuchets being moved into position. The night would be a bombardment, and that night would be filled with screams and flames. He shook his head. thinking how he got to this point in his life. It had been a wasted life in his opinion. "That was a stirring speech," a calm voice said behind him. Dervin turned, his hand spinning his spear down so it was wedged behind his back, pointing it at the speaker. It was the Lord Warden Commander of the Fountain Legion, or at least he assumed it was, as he was dressed in the normal dress of a warden. "Don't sneak up on me." Dervin did not lower his spear. "I am wary of a knife in the back, now more than ever." "Why is that?" the Lord Warden asked, not even glancing at the spear. "Do you fear the dictator's wrath?" "I fear many things," Dervin admitted. "Men who hide their faces especially." He raised his spear to point at the Lord Warden's blue silk face mask. The Lord Warden gave no reaction to this, but simply pushed the spear aside with a slow two-finger gesture that showed a deep discipline. He moved to stand next to Dervin to look out onto the battlefield. He let out a sigh. So much lost, all for the glory of a single man. "And the attack hasn't even begun," Dervin agreed. It was true. The army had simply trampled over much of the crops and destroyed much of the irrigation pens with merely their presence. "I fear much more will be lost before this battle is over. The infrastructure out there will be hard to replace, though the dead men will service the land and make it bountiful again." "That makes me feel so much better," Dervin huffed. "My sister is called Hope. Feel like going down to my family estate and killing her as well." Again, the Lord Warden did not react to this. "I was listening to how you spoke to your men. You are right. You must fight for the people, not the city. There is nothing more sacred than the people within these walls. You, not us. The Fountain Legion will do what is needed to save the kingdom." The Lord Warden did not look at Dervin when he said this. "So you'll fight with us?" "I will." Dervin missed a breath with relief. "We may survive this then." Alistair's forces will only be 4 days away, however. The Lord Warden seemed determined to crush Dervin's morale. If his forces join with this army, there will be no hope. "He has sustained many casualties taking the harbour city," Dervin said, desperately holding on to his courage. "His army won't be as large as the scouts first predict." "True, they already outnumber us here, though." He inclined his head in a strange shrug-like motion. "If we were to make them panic and flee, the rout would be highly infectious. However, this war is with Alistair. If we hold out long enough for him to arrive, we can negotiate with him. Or we could surrender." "Of course we could," the Lord Warden smiled. "It is a shame the most recent parley ended so badly. I wonder if they were to accept another. Would they kill you for an assassin before they accepted the surrender?" Dervin inclined his head in appreciation of this. Any advice for a commander way out of his depth? "Yes," the Lord Warden turned to face him. "Move the ground-based trebuchets against the walls this night. We will move them back to their firing positions when we return our volleys. When the defenders are ready for war, then we will plan our strategy. But for now, you have work to do." Dervin knew that this meant the conversation was over, and he knew better than to argue with a man such as the Lord Warden. He had no idea what to do aside from what he'd just been told, so he started there. The few soldiers and militia companies that were awaiting for him were eager for his orders and for something to do. They moved the 47 trebuchets forward, so they were against the wall as far as they could, and the outer section of the city was being evacuated. It was far from orderly, though. One of the trebuchets collapsed under its own weight as soon as it was moved. It was clear here just how bad the city's condition was. The trebuchets were decades old and hadn't been used in battle in their entire existence. They had no time or room to test them, however. Every shot would be a blessing. The afternoon had passed in sweat and bad moods, and by the time that the men had taken their position on the wall, they were exhausted. The Lord Warden had made no movement since his conversation on the wall. He appeared to be asleep, but he was in fact in deep meditation, looking out onto the battlefield. Dervin wasted no time respecting his religious beliefs, however, and brought him roughly back to reality. "You promised me a strategy," he demanded. "I promised no such thing." The Lord Warden didn't change his gaze. "I have no obligation to you." "And the city?" Dervin asked. "What obligation do you have to that?" The Lord Warden huffed and stood up. "They'll bombard the city overnight and begin their assault in the morning." He pointed at the army. "Observe," he said in the ancient tongue. "Siege towers?" Dervin looked. He let out a roar of annoyance, both at himself and at the army. Of course they're building siege towers. How else are they getting over the walls? "You see, but not observe," the Lord Warden smiled. "We take the bombardment. When the sun rises, they will fall into formation and pause their assault to rotate their forces. We'll move the trebuchets into position and ready for attack. The bombardment will resume until the siege towers move up. They will pause to avoid hitting them with their own shots. That is when you fire. Everything else you have." "And where do you come in?" "My legion will do what I order them to," the Lord Warden said cryptically. "Your priority must be destroying their siege equipment before their soldiers. If you break their rams at the gates, they won't be able to attack the gate in the same way. Break their siege towers, and they must spend time making more. It's not particularly hard for them." Dervin shook his head. "In case you forgot, they have entire forests at their disposal." "Time is time." "Sir," a voice called from behind him on street level. It was the lieutenant. He and 2 other guardsmen were dragging a bald man in white and gold robes. "What is this?" the Lord Warden demanded. "This is the High Priest." Dervin folded his arms, smirking, as he made his way down the stairs. "Nice to see you doing something useful instead of hiding away in some hole, Your Holiness." "This man sought sanctuary in the High Temple," the Lord Warden protested, placing a hand on his sword. "I granted it myself. You had no right to take him away." "You're right," Dervin inclined his head to one side. "Yet here we are," he frowned down at the High Priest. "You were missed, sir. We have work for you. Free Decimus and the other high-ranking nobles, so they may take command of the city." "How dare you defy a holy place with your brutality?" the High Priest demanded, from floor level, ignoring Dervin's request. "A question I am keen to hear an answer to as well," the Lord Warden said threateningly. "Ignatius has lost his mind in despair." Dervin narrowed his eyes. "He has arrested Lord Decimus and Lord Camervan, so you are now the only person left to offer pardons. Unfortunately, that means you can't hide away in a temple." The Lord Warden inclined his head. "Why didn't you just say so?" He relaxed and let go of his sword. "No man should run from his honor and duty, sir." He looked down to the High Priest. "Go and do as he says." "I will not take orders from you. I took sanctuary in my own temple," the High Priest blustered. "That is where I belong." "The temple is not yours," the Lord Warden hissed in the ancient tongue. "The temple belongs to the people and our fathers. You have no claim over it." "I am the High Priest of the Great Kingdom," the High Priest blustered in the common tongue. "I have claim over whatever I want." "You are wrong in that, sir," the Lord Warden shook his head. "He is a true pawn of Ignatius. He will be no help for you." Dervin had reached this conclusion himself, and nodded sadly. "I hereby rescind your rank, my lord. You are no longer the High Priest. Take him, Captain. Let us prepare for battle." "That sounds good," Dervin smiled sadly. This meant only one thing. He was in command, as he was the only captain of the citadel guard left in the city. They went up to the wall again, the objections of the high priest fading away as he was dragged through the street. They could see the legionary lines of troops forming into attack formation. It was more for show than a practical purpose, but it was still impressive to behold. It was a perfect example of Roman battle formations. 10 lines of light spearmen at the front, with 10 lines of heavy troops behind them, and an equal amount of reserve heavy troops taking up rear positions. The gaps between the lines were filled with the banner bearers, the sergeants and the horn blowers, one of each for every 60 men. Horsemen were on both flanks, with hundreds of rangers strategically placed through the lines. It wasn't the troops that attracted Dervin's attention. It was the trebuchet formations forming up behind them. "When will it begin?" he asked, more to himself than anyone present. The Lord Warden didn't answer at once, but he waited a few moments. He was looking behind him. The sun was cresting the mountains behind them, casting long shadows onto the field the soldiers were standing on. Torches were starting to be lit throughout the city, and suddenly, in an instant, as the sun sank behind the mountains, everything went dim. Now. Begin it did. As if on his command, the trebuchets began their first volley. The flaming masses flew through the air and smashed into the city with mercilessly loud roars and fountain-like spurts of flame. Dervin ducked instinctively, despite the fact that the strikes were far out of danger of hitting him. The Lord Warden did not flinch. The second volley came immediately after the first, then the third. "I have things to attend to," the Lord Warden informed him conversationally, his voice carrying clearly over the destruction. "The courage of your men will waver tonight. Ensure that none of them flee. Assign someone to Ignatius. He will cause problems if he is allowed to roam free." He bowed, as another volley lit up the sky and left, his white cloak trailing the ground, unperturbed by the destruction around him.